Have you ever been scrolling through the theological discussions online and seen the words Calvinism and Reformed used? A lot of the time, they're thrown around like they mean the exact same thing. But do they? Well, today we're going to untangle this common confusion and get to the bottom of what these terms really mean.
So let's just ask the question head-on. Are these two terms just different labels for the same set of beliefs? And it's a totally fair question because in so many conversations, that's exactly how they're used. But as we're about to find out, while they are definitely related, super closely related in fact, they are not identical. There's a nuance here that's actually really, really important.
And check this out. There's this classic saying that gets right to the heart of the whole thing. All Reformed are Calvinists, but not all Calvinists are Reformed. Now, at first glance, that sounds like a total riddle, right? It sounds a little confusing. But stick with me here because by the end of this explainer, that statement is going to make perfect sense, I promise.
Okay, so to solve this riddle, we've got to break it down into pieces, and we're going to start with the more specific, the narrower of the two terms, Calvinism. Getting a handle on this piece first is really the key to unlocking the whole picture.
Now, you got to understand, the famous theologian John Calvin, he wrote about, well, pretty much everything. But the term Calvinism, especially as it's used today, has really been zeroed in on one specific area. When most people say Calvinism, what they're almost always talking about is the doctrine of salvation.
And there's a fancy-sounding word for this, soteriology. That's just the technical term for the part of theology that wrestles with the huge question, how are people saved? So, whenever you hear people debating Calvinism, 9 times out of 10, they're really debating Calvin's soteriology. And that soteriology is famously, or maybe infamously, depending on who you ask, summarized by the acronym TULIP. It stands for 5 key ideas that all lock together: total depravity, unconditional election, limited atonement, irresistible grace, and the perseverance of the saints. Now, we're not going to do a deep dive on each one here, but the main idea is that together they paint this picture of God's complete and total sovereignty in the process of salvation. This TULIP framework, that is the core of what people usually mean when they say Calvinism.
So if TULIP is the core, how does that build into something bigger? Well, that's where the term Reformed comes into play. You see, Reformed theology isn't just that core doctrine of salvation. It's the entire system that's built around that core. It's much, much broader.
Here is probably the best way to think about it, using a little geometry. We all know that all squares are rectangles, right? But not all rectangles are squares. In exactly the same way, Calvinism, that TULIP framework we just talked about, is the square. It's an essential, non-negotiable part of Reformed theology. But Reformed theology is the whole rectangle. It's a complete system that includes the square, but has a whole lot more to it.
So what else is in that bigger rectangle? Well, Reformed theology is a full-on worldview. Yes, it starts with TULIP, for sure, but it also includes a really distinct way of reading the whole Bible through a series of covenants God makes with humanity. That's called covenant theology. It has very specific beliefs about how the church should be run, what the sacraments like baptism and communion really mean, and this all-encompassing vision for how God's sovereignty applies to literally every single area of life, not just salvation.
Okay, so knowing this distinction, it's not just some academic exercise. It actually helps us make sense of the real world, the landscape of different churches and denominations you see all around you. It's kind of like building out a family tree.
And this table just makes it crystal clear. Let's take Presbyterians, for example. They hold the TULIP, so are they Calvinist? Yes. They also hold to those other pillars we mentioned, like covenant theology and infant baptism. So are they Reformed? Yes again. Now, let's look at Reformed Baptists. They are passionate about TULIP, so they are absolutely Calvinists. But they disagree on some of those other key Reformed doctrines, like how the church should be governed, and most famously, they practice believers' baptism, not infant baptism. So are they Calvinist? Yes. But are they fully Reformed? No. And there you have it. The riddle is solved.
Okay, so we've cracked the code. We solved the riddle. But you might still be thinking, all right, but does this really matter? Is this just a game of theological labels? And actually, it's not. Understanding this distinction has some really practical consequences.
For starters, it just brings so much clarity. It helps you have more precise conversations without talking past each other. It also helps you understand history and make sense of why all these different branches of the Protestant Reformation exist. And it's incredibly practical if you're ever looking for a church and want to understand the real differences between, say, a Presbyterian church down the street and a Reformed Baptist one. But maybe most importantly, It shows you the difference between just agreeing on a single doctrine and embracing an entire comprehensive worldview for all of life.
So the final question really isn't about which labels we use. It's about what we do with what we believe. Beyond all the terms and definitions, how does a complete, all-encompassing worldview, whatever it might be, actually shape the day-to-day way a person lives and works and interacts with the world around them? Now that is something worth thinking about.